It's Elsie's Little Pickles. That's right. We are back for another one. And this one, it's special for me because we're going to have our first guest. But before we get to that, let's hit the news.
Well, I've got one interesting piece of news, Scientists say that only one type of alien life form could make it to Earth's doorstep, according to a Harvard expert. Do you know what kind of alien that would be, Steve?
No, I do not.
He says it would be not a biological alien, but rather AI.
Oh, so it's going to be an AI alien.
That's right.
Well, there's also
a drone, if you will.
There's also a professor who thinks that he has proven that we are living in a simulation theory.
This is just a simulation.
And this is just my theory on it. So hopefully either it is an AI alien or we are in a simulation, because quite frankly, moving forward, you know how much I hate to do this. I hate to talk about specifically Trump, but in general, I don't want to be the guy that's coming down always on the conservatives or the Republicans. Unfortunately, if you've paid any attention in the news at all, you've heard of Project 2025. And
correct.
You were able to bring in our first guest who actually knows something about this shitty plan of the Republicans and conservatives. So I will let you...
It's hard to read anything on it without screaming in your head, fuck!
Yeah, there's a lot of fuck screaming. But with no further delay, why don't you go ahead and introduce our new friend?
He has written several editorials, and he's quite intelligent, if you ask me. I've grown to love this man. We've never had the actual opportunity to speak one-on-one, but we do exchange text messages all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Franz.
Hey,
say hello,
Franz. That is about as excited as I've ever heard somebody get about being introduced. Well, I guess let's jump into it. I mean, I'm gonna shoot some questions at you if you don't care, just to make sure that I have some sort of an understanding of what this is all about. My understanding is that the Project 2025 was basically spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation, which is a very conservative think tank. However, on this go-around, what they decided to do was they decided that they were going to try to incorporate all of the conservative think tanks in an effort to put together a program, or, essentially IKEA instructions from hell on how to run the government the way these conservative think tanks think they ought to be run. Is that pretty much on point?
Pretty much. I mean, there were several people that were involved in Trump's cabinet that are still allied with Trump that were involved in writing it.
Navarro was...
So you can kind of guess who they have in.
Yeah, I mean, well, Peter Navarro was one of them, and he's currently doing, 4 months or 5 months?
Yes.
So I don't know how involved he is at this point, but yeah, Peter Navarro was one.
He's writing letters.
Yeah. Stephen Moore, Donald Devine. So these are all people that are kind of like known quantities. But essentially, from my understanding, what this is this is meant to be a playbook for the next conservative or Republican that comes to the presidency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's to be done completely through the executive departments. That way they can avoid Congress.
Yeah. So essentially what the plan is then, again, correct me if I go off the tracks a little bit here, but the idea is that they want to get to the point where it's essentially unchecked power by the executive branch and Congress is not able to step in.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, they're going to try and eliminate anybody who won't kiss the ring.
Well,
yeah, that's actually one of the things in it is you have to take a loyalty.
You do have to take well, we'll get to that in a second. that in and of itself is ridiculous in my opinion. But just to kind of again, I want to try to build the foundation on this. Essentially, from what my understanding is there's 4 pillars of this whole thing. You got your policy pillars, you've got your personnel, you've got your training, and you've got your 180-day playbook. With that, again, if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of how they broke it down, was into a 4-part plan, correct?
Yeah, they broke it down into a 4-part plan, and it's almost like 1,000 pages.
Yeah, it's what, 920 some pages or something like. So that's the other thing I think is interesting is that if you make something in the written word long enough, chances are no one's going to read it, which means it's got an easier chance of being snuck through. You know, I mean, the same thing could have been said for the Affordable Care Act. In fact, I believe it was the Republicans that said, you know, it's just 2,000 pages. We're not reading this. And I get that. Okay. However, when you're trying to change the government from what it is into basically unchecked power for the Conservative Party, isn't that really kind of borderline fascism?
It's absolutely fascism. I mean, the whole thing reads, it's fascism.
Okay, so
one of the things in there is a national registry that if you get pregnant, they can track you to make sure you don't get an abortion.
Well, that goes into the policy, right? So that's kind of like basically the policy is to restore family and protect children, dismantle like all of the administrative state things that conservatives disagree with, whether that's EPA, whether that's DHS, you know, FEMA, Department of Education. So, all right. So let me ask you this, okay? From your perspective and your understanding of this, what benefit is there in eliminating those departments? Where are they coming from where they see a benefit? Because I don't see a benefit to it. I do think myself personally, you know, FEMA may not be perfect, but it's at least something to help people when you have all these major catastrophes happening, specifically weather related. And you can say that, you know, there's no global warming, but there's still hurricanes that are taking out half of Florida or North Carolina or South Carolina. You know, you've still got Department of Homeland Security, which, again, I don't know that I fully agree with that particular department, but I do see that.
I used to work with them.
Yeah, so I do see like some benefit to either paring them down or eliminating certain ones. But like Department of Education, as an example, shouldn't there be some sort of standard that every state has to follow in order to keep all the children kind of on the same page so that they all grow up to be able to be competitive in the workplace?
If you look at the red states and the way they're doing the education now, they're softening the history on slavery. They're, you know, eliminating certain parts of history or banning books of other people that live in the United States. So it's one of the it comes down to that Christian nationalism of this is a Christian state, this is how it should be, so we're just going to avoid all of this stuff. That's really what it's power.
I would agree with you. It seems to be like there's this unholy combination between Christian nationalism and conservatives, specifically the far right conservatives. I don't believe that all conservatives feel this way, but I do see that, you know, like the idea of, like you just said, having to register that you're pregnant so that they can track it and make sure that you don't get an abortion.
Is the idea of registering pregnancy to avoid abortion, couldn't there be a little bit of that keeping up with the Joneses when it comes to Islam?
It's very possible. I mean, the right wing has a lot of support from white nationalists, separatists, Nazis, and things like that, and they're concerned about, you know, child birth rates in the United States, and that's one of the main reasons why they're backing a ban on abortion. That's why the Nazis banned abortion back in the 40s.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They want to.
I see a lot of an underlying theme when it comes to that.
Nazism?
Islam. No. Islam has so many people being born in other countries. Their numbers are increasing. I have long felt that is part of the background of anti-abortion, to try to pump up those Christian numbers.
You know, you might be right. You might be right on that. And look, I mean, there is an argument to be made on both sides saying, one side saying we have 8 billion people on the planet, it's not sustainable. And the other side saying, well, if you look at the population growth, that's not sustainable either. We need to find somewhere in between. And I do understand the idea of thinking that if you force or if you take away birth control, which is also in this, if I'm not mistaken, right, Franz?
Yeah, which I mean, birth control is used for more than just birth.
Right, but they want to take it away.
IUDs help with situations like PCOS and high blood pressure and all sorts of stuff. So it's like they're just thinking of it, linear and not thinking of all the other things that, just like when all the states did those abortion bans for the, certain medications. Those medications are used for other stuff as well. So now you have people dying because they can't get that bad because they may say, oh, it's associated with blah, so we'll just ban it.
Maybe it's just my mental health, but when I think of anything when it comes to Christian nationalism and pro-birthing, because it's not really pro-life, it's just pro-birth at this point.
Pro-life.
I'm sorry?
Pro-life is a lie.
Yeah, I think we can probably all agree on that.
All I have in my head is the Monty Python song, "Every sperm is sacred."
Yeah. What's ironic is that the Catholic Church themselves supported and provided abortion until the 1800s.
I didn't know that. That's fucking amazing.
And then a pope on a whim decided to look at Aristotle philosophy about life at conception and decided, well, that's right. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, you have a pope that used a pagan philosopher's idea, which was in the minority at the time, to inform.
Well, see that your confusion in that is to think that the Catholic Church or any man-made institution follows their own fucking rules.
You go back far enough, you do find religious paths, that do actually follow their rules. I'm a Norse pagan, and I'm not like the neo-pagan kind. I'm a paleo-pagan. I am old school. Make the Roman soldiers piss in their kilts. Old school.
See, but that's something that you again, not to get away from Project 2025, but you can respect that because there's not you're not approaching it from being a hypocrite. You're saying this is what I believe. I'm not forcing it on you. This is how I practice my spirituality, my belief system, which is what we're all supposed to be able to do. But this Project 2025, specifically with the Christian nationalist aspect to it, seems to me to be leading us to a Christian version of Sharia law. Okay, so again, we're on the same page.
When we do a show on Norse pagan religion, we're going to have you back on, Franz. Yeah, I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I follow people like Dr. Jackson Crawford, the channel called the Welsh Viking, Norse Magic Beliefs, Ocean Keltoi. Yeah.
All right, so we'll definitely have you back for that. But back to
well over 20 years, but yeah, back to 2025.
I think the thing that I find the most interesting about it is the fact that not to jump the gun because I was going to leave this as more of an ending part, but the idea of government control of sexuality, essentially, and gender. So, like, one of their main, or at least this is what I pulled out of it, they want to get rid of any discussion on gender or gender identity, and they want to ban that and consider it pornography. So not only do they want to ban pornography as we know it, but they're going to throw any conversation, any expression, of LGBTQ is basically going to get criminalized.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me.
I mean,
would that include the Bible? Because there's some pornographic material there.
I don't think that I don't think that they'll step up to the Bible. Call me crazy.
No, they won't go that far.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's like if you look at when it talks about like LGBT being obscene. They don't give specifics, which leaves it wide open for anybody to do
Yep.
to even interpret as their existence.
Exactly.
Well, that's the key word there is interpretation.
So
Some of these right wingers.
So not only is it that, but they want to. All right, so we've got unchecked power by the executive. Aside from that, the LGBTQ thing and pornography thing, which I think, good luck. You know what I mean? To me, getting rid of porn in any way, shape, or form goes back to what was his name, the actor who was in charge of the NRA forever. You'll get my Charlton Heston. You'll get my gun when you pry it out of my dead cold hand. You'll get my porn when you pry my dead cold cock out of my hand. There's no way that they're going to be able to make this all go away. And even if they try, it's just going to go into, black market and underground. It's like everything else. As soon as you try to put a prohibition on it, it just becomes bigger.
It's a whole new prohibition.
Yeah, it's crazy. So again, getting back to it a little bit here, they want to get rid of environmental protections. They want to punish corporations for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They want to end trade with China. Is that true? They want to end trade with China?
I've heard that. I haven't really read that part, but I mean, there's parts where you can kind of be like, well, I can see how they could go with that, which I mean is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that, just by getting out of the global community and moving away from globalism, whether you agree with globalism or not, it's the way the world works now.
Yeah, it's a global economy.
And
which is why the US and China haven't gone at each other, because we both know that if one of us goes after the other, everybody's going down.
So wouldn't that be basically a shot across the bow if we pulled out of trade with China?
Pretty much, because that opens up a whole nother mess.
That's what I'm saying. Like that opens up for not only trade war, but also war.
Yeah.
Okay.
War.
Yeah. Good. I want to get back to
this. This sounds fun.
I want to step back for a second and go back to the LGBTQ and gender discussions. And the idea of, they want to ban certain language. They want to basically make it as if there's a whole group of people who don't exist, or a whole group of ideas
not only
that don't
just not exist, but they'd be able to, if I'm not mistaken, arrest them. We're not just talking suppression, but repression, arrest. What point in time do they cross that line into even death panels?
Yep.
Okay, so with that in mind, does this not seem similar in some ways to almost like Jim Crow? So yeah, we got rid of slavery, but now we have these Jim Crow era laws, and we create a situation where we basically, instead of having slaves, we just lock up the people that we don't like. Back then it was black people. We lock them up, put them in a forced labor situation in prison, whether it was a chain gang or whatnot, or even to this day now with you've got how many for-profit prisons. Isn't this opening it up to where they would just be able to, if they think you're LGBTQ, or if they think that you have a gender issue, or they think that you got an abortion, whether they can prove it or not, basically just send you to jail?
Yeah.
All right. So the definitive, quick, short answer was yes. And that's terrifying. That should be terrifying to everyone.
I believe during the Nazi regime, they would sew symbols onto people's clothing.
Yeah.
To signify if you're a homosexual or whatever.
I think it was the pink triangle.
Correct. That's probably going to be that next step. Maybe not onto your clothing, but maybe onto your driver's license.
So for anyone who's listening, again, I hate coming across like we're just piling on to conservatives. But I don't.
But this is not piling on, because they have openly said this.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I think that we have to call balls and strikes as much as we can, and on both sides. However, I can't think of anything no matter how fucking loony it is that comes out of the left that even approaches this. Can either of you? Yeah, like you could take the most absolutely insane, batshit crazy left-wing fucking nut, and they can't even come up with ideas that even scratch the surface of some of this shit.
Well, it's along the lines of the let's pass laws for pro-birthing under the guise of pro-life, but we're going to cut funding to school lunches for children.
Right.
We're
A duality of, look what this hand's doing.
Sorry, Franz. Go ahead. He didn't hear that you were talking, Franz.
No, it's fine. But yeah, all the right wing, they're pro-life, but yet there's school lunches, or the number one killer of kids today is firearms.
Yes.
Healthcare, housing, food, and they have no ideas on how to fix it.
They can't even help with child obesity and diabetes at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but when you get into the idea that they're going to criminalize this shit, and this was the part that got me the most. All right. This fucking blew my mind. They essentially created through this website, they created where you can essentially put an application in. All right. So if the conservatives, whether with Trump in 2025 or whoever the conservative nominee is that comes into the presidency next, one of the things that they want to, or that they've been doing, is this idea of fealty, of loyalty to the dear leader, right? So, what was it? There was a policy that Schedule F that Trump had signed into law, which basically gave the federal government or him power to fire anyone at any time for any reason. Now, he never really got to get into it with that. He never went deep with that. I think he did use it to fire somebody that was leading the Veterans Affairs or something like that. I'm not sure. I know he used it a couple times, but he didn't get to clean house throughout what he calls the deep state. So what this essentially has set up is the opportunity for anyone who the next conservative, again, could be Trump, could be anyone else, but the next conservative, they're going to try to utilize this to say, you have the choice to bend the knee and kiss the ring, or you're fired.
Yeah.
And using this conservative, basically linked in, they will backfill only what they need to backfill, but they will also have trained them to where it will pretty much be like, you got fired today, you're taking that job tomorrow. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's either you swear fealty or you're going to get it. And yeah, that's not how an actual, good nation works.
So I may be wrong on my history here, but criminalizing anything that has to do with gender, LGBTQ, banning books, burning books.
The first thing that the Nazis did.
That's where I was going is this is all, like, I used to, I don't know about you, Franz, but I used to sit back prior to, I hate to say it, but prior to 2015 and think, oh, those Germans, for as smart as they are, how could they have been fooled? They're great engineers, but boy, they didn't see that one coming, did they? How could they have been so stupid? How could they have let it happen to them? Why didn't they fight back? And I feel like I'm a German.
You're living it.
I feel like I'm living it. I feel like I'm fucking living it. I feel like this is like, 1938, 39, 40 in Germany, where it's just like everything that they're doing technically is legal, right? Until they get power, and then they can flip what legal is.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. Like I keep saying, Nazis are supporting the Republicans for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And most people just dismiss it offhand. We both know one that does repeatedly. But yeah, there's a reason I say that. you know.
Well, it seems that it's just absolutely fucking true. For Christ's sake,
Yeah, true.
What was it today? There was, I forget the name. It's not the Proud Boys. They were in Charleston, I think.
Oh, the rally.
Yeah, the rally in Charleston.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, you see the video of this, and you realize,
just for perfect transparency, one of the people in Charleston on that night was actually David Duke. A lot of people don't know that.
There was one today.
Oh, there was one today.
In
West, one today.
Yeah, one today. They did it in New York, like a week or two ago. They did it in West Virginia today. Let's see if I can find the fucking story. Damn it. Go ahead, Keith. You can. While I look for.
Well, when it comes to the proliferation of this movement, I mean, you can interexchange the word Nazism with Christian nationalism at this point. I mean, one of the first steps when it comes to kissing the ring that I've noticed, and I've brought it up many a times in conversation, is who is now in charge of the RNC, Lara Trump. And did they not get rid of a lot of people in the RNC who did not or would not kiss the ring?
They did.
Yeah.
They're in turmoil.
Well, when you have Laura Trump, when you have Eric's fucking wife running the RNC, if you don't think you're in trouble, I mean, what was it? 6 months prior, she was trying to become a country singing fucking star.
Still is.
Oh,
her little country album.
Okay, so this is still going on.
Yeah. It's, if any of you have not heard it, it is just such a wonderful recording. I've heard better noises coming out of my ass.
Yeah.
But yeah, another, people talk about, well, specifically Donald Trump, who keeps claiming it's a witch hunt, that Biden has weaponized the Department of Justice, which is a travesty. I am reminded of a time when he used the Department of Justice to go after Hillary Clinton, who was already investigated 14 times in subcommittees. He instructed James Comey to investigate her. He could not come up with anything and was against it, so he fired James Comey and then weaponized the Department of Justice and the FBI against James Comey, if I am not mistaken.
Yep, and has flat out said that if he gets to be president again, he's going to go on a binge of revenge. How do you think he's going to do that?
Well, you can't without weaponizing the departments.
Exactly.
I mean, at that point, if Project 2025 goes through, there will be no stopping him.
Yeah, he's already said he'll start being a dictator day one. You don't get a dictator for one day. That never.
Yeah, that doesn't typically work out.
Has anyone been a dictator for one day? And
let me just have a taste of dictatorship. I promise I'm going to give it back when I'm done. I just need it for today. No, that's and I would say even further with that, all of these court cases that Trump is going through is doing nothing more than really spinning him out in a way that if he does get into power again, there's going to be a lot of judges that find themselves, because if they can implement this, then I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to go, no, you're not going to be a judge anymore. In fact, you're not going to be a lawyer anymore. I'm going to take away your ability to make a living. I could totally see him doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's even scarier stuff in there. It's like going back to the Nazi thing. Day one, they're going to implement the Insurrection Act.
Mm-hmm. They will probably all get pardons, the people that are still in jail or awaiting trial.
Right. Now, the scary thing about the Insurrection Act, it's supposed to be at the behest of the state governors. They're just going to implement it, which means martial law.
Right out of the gate.
Military on the streets.
Right out of the gate.
Local police officers under the command of the federal government.
That was the one thing I was going to bring up, is the idea that all of a sudden local police officers would now be essentially federal. They would be responsible to the federal government, but they would get their check from the local. Correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you pay
trust the police as it is.
Yeah. Well, fuck, are you kidding me? At this point, I mean, like I hate to say it, but nowadays it's hard to know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are because they've got everyone so divided in their little tribal fucking communities.
My dad was a cop, and I don't trust cops. The stuff I heard, oh man.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I've had some friends that were cops, and some of the shit that they said has chilled it just fucking made my backbone go fucking liquid.
My dad flat out said he used to carry a knife in his pocket, wipe clean of fingerprints wrapped in a handkerchief, just in case.
Yeah, you have to.
I mean, and he was a cop in the 60s and 70s.
Well, that was when it was crazy, though. 60s and 70s cops were a different breed. I mean, that thin blue line was not so fucking thin. It was more like a thick, chunky fucking blue line.
Yeah, but it's like this whole police brutality. It's nothing new.
No, I think no. I don't think that it's new. I think that what's changed is everyone has a camera in their pocket. Everyone has.
Yeah, we can prove it.
We can prove, and I think that unfortunately for the black community, they're just sitting there now going, "Oh, now you motherfuckers believe us now because we have the technology to prove it. You believe us," and I'm as white gets, but I used to be on the road and I would travel with other comedians and oftentimes I would travel with, black comedians. And we'd go into stores and I could tell you this one time in particular, it was eye-opening to me because I was probably 26, 27 years old. I didn't have, me and Keith grew up in a situation where like, I know it sounds fucking passe to say it, but we didn't really recognize color because we were just taught like you judge a person on who they are, not what color they are. And
not how I was raised.
Yeah, well, with a cop, with a cop father.
He was a cop. He was a cop. He was an army vet, and he was also an actual Nazi. So, yeah, I was.
So you really know what you're talking about when it comes to recognizing Nazism in the Christian nationalists.
Exactly,
dude.
He believes this.
That had to have been tough.
I was forced to read the Turner Diaries, March of the Titans.
Probably Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
At what age?
I mean, it really started at like 10.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's fucking tough. But
I was 12. I was 12. I was handed, the Turner Diary, and he goes, "Read it."
Oh fuck. What? And you're like, can't I just get, I don't know, like a graphic novel? Like get a comic book?
Some G.I. Joe figures.
Holy shit. So
back to 2025. What I would like to know is who is funding the Heritage Project? Yeah, project.
There was one group, I can't remember the name right now, but it was actually a supposed Christian group that went over to Uganda to lobby for their law that would allow outright murder of LGBT.
That would be some of the people from Chick-fil-A and their foundation who've been dabbling their fingers, or I should say hands and wrists.
Is that where those Chick-fil-A motherfuckers go on Sunday?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
They all board a plane.
Go down to Uganda.
But I do know the Koch brothers fund the Heritage Project. Chase Bank, if I'm not mistaken, Dow Chemical, Pfizer, for those interested, Mobile, and Sears.
They all chipped in for the funding of this?
For the Heritage Foundation. Historically.
Are they just contributors? Are they just contributors, or are they contributing specifically to the Project 2025?
Just I'm talking to the Heritage Foundation.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's important.
Adolf and Joseph Coors, General Motors, they contribute to the Heritage Foundation.
I don't know, man. I think part of it is this idea that they are, through the course of this, and you see this, I think, with conservatives in general, is they are trying to create almost a mythology behind this, using the idea of the founding fathers almost like these super fucking natural creatures that were, texting Jesus, like this idea that between the founding fathers and Jesus, they've got all the righteous indignation. They've got all the power. And I think that goes with anyone. That's why I've always said that any type of religion is dangerous, is because when you think you have God on your side, well, then no one can tell you differently, right? So if you're a Christian nationalist and you're saying, I believe all this stuff needs to be true because it's or be law, and this is how we need to run the country because Jesus said so and Jesus is on my side. But let's go back to the founding fathers for a second. When the Constitution was being written, when the Declaration of Independence was being written, people seemed to think like these were all like older fellas. And I mean, yeah, like Ben Franklin was around 70, right? Ish, I believe. George Washington was in his low 40s, maybe mid 40s. Alexander Hamilton was like in like 21 or 22 or some shit when this all went down. These are just
they were young guys.
Yeah, they weren't what you would consider these giants. Yeah, these gigantic old men who, like statues will be built just because they showed up. They were just trying to figure this shit out. And the idea that the Constitution, or that we can't make changes to these things as the country evolves, seems to be against what they actually wanted and how they actually wrote it. That we should be changing it on a regular basis. We should be updating
a republic if we can keep it.
Yes, a republic.
The amendments were put in there for the ability to do that for a reason.
But it does seem like this idea that the Christian nationalists are taking on, it almost seems as if they want it to be whatever those founding documents are. You cannot change them, and you have to take them with the original ideology. But we're going to change some of that because Jesus trumps Ben Franklin and George Washington and Hamilton. So,
and then of course you have all of them that ignore the fact that Jefferson himself said the Constitution needs to be scrapped every 19 years to avoid generational tyranny. They always forget that part.
Yeah. So we're in this now. We're in this position, and man, I hate to sound doom and gloom. You know what I mean? But I've been in this position on this podcast before where I'm like, I just don't see how this is going to work out well. So let's back up for just a second. Let me ask you this, because I've kind of driven like my questions, but when you went through this Project 2025, what did you find to be the thing that was like most, or a couple of things that might have been the most jarring to you or disturbing to you?
It's hard to pick.
Well, I mean, you don't have to pick just one. I mean, like what are your
some of it's stuff we've already covered. There was one, the National Guard would be deputized into ICE so they could round up quote unquote illegal immigrants and put them all in a actual concentration camp on the border.
Jesus.
And allow them to maybe pick up homeless along the way and do the same thing.
So it won't be long then if you have it would seem to me at least that it's not a far step to go, okay, well, we think that you have a mental disorder. We're gonna send in the clowns, we're gonna pick you up, and we're gonna take you and put you in incarceration.
Oh, you don't have your driver's license on you. Well, we're gonna round you up and
take you down to the border and
yes.
put you in a camp.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at every single point in this, the Nazis did the same thing.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say is that, like, I don't want to be like all these other people that run to the Nazi comparison, because I do think that this idea of always saying, oh, this politician, he's worse than Hitler. Oh, this is, Nazism. Oh, this is, Germany 1943 or whatever. It does take away from
it does, when I throw that word out, I'm throwing it out there for.
Well, that's my point. That's exactly my point is I don't want to be the one that always runs to Nazism. But sometimes, as is the case in this, there are direct lines that you can draw from their policy, their organization, how they're putting the organization together, what they want to come out of it. I mean, you can literally draw lines to Hitler and how he came up in power.
Even some of the verbiage that has been used to dehumanize immigrants. I mean, Adolf Hitler famously called Jews vermin.
As did Trump.
As did Trump calling immigrants vermin to dehumanize people. To get people used to the idea that, well, they're immigrants, they're vermin, they're less than human.
At one point, Trump said, poison.
Right, and that was also something that Hitler said.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, when you throw up these dog whistles like that, and then you go, oh, no, that's not what I meant. That's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolute bullshit. So I guess
they need someone to go in and say, well, what did you mean by saying that specific sequence of words
that have never been uttered by anyone other than Hitler?
Yes.
And in fact, here's the direct quote. And we just had AI search through everything from that point to today. And there's
there's a correlation between Trump's stances on things and what Pat Buchanan wanted to do back in the 90s, which Trump actually was critical of at the time until he took it, just as the phrase "Make America Great Again." That was actually used by Reagan.
Well, he's a thief no matter what. I mean, that should be evident. I really do feel bad for some of the MAGA people, because now it's one of those things where it's like, even if they recognize they're wrong, they're so committed that they can't back out. You know what I mean? Like there is this position of, I got to be ride or die with my guy. And I think that it's the lack of education on, the lack of understanding, the lack of perspective, and the fact that they don't have any historical knowledge that they can pull from to recognize, oh, wait, the world has been here before and not that long ago.
A lot of the red states are wanting to change how history is taught.
Well, that's it. The red states are trying to change how history is taught. I think, well, let's put it this way. Let me ask you, come November, do you see anything good happening? No matter who's elected.
Biden is better. I personally don't like Biden.
Yeah.
The group we're in, I'm posting shit about Biden just as much, but better than Trump. I mean, Trump gets elected, Project 2025 will be instituted, and that is everything's done.
Well, see, here's my take. My take is that, and me and Keith agree on this, Biden is better, but still fucking horrible, right?
Yeah.
It's not an issue of thinking that Biden is better.
He's not the savior.
No, he's not the savior.
No.
He's
not even the janitor.
Well, that's the thing is I think Biden is basically a doorstop at this point. It's just having Biden get elected for a second term is just putting a door jam or doorstop for, preventing democracy, the door on democracy getting closed.
Yeah, I get nervous when it comes to thoughts of post-Biden. Let's say he gets elected for 4 years. Who's after that? Like, I just don't see a strong candidate in the Democratic Party take over.
I don't either.
Biden.
I think they've already decided it's going to be Gavin Newsom. I think he's the one on the bench screaming, "Put me in, coach." Aside from that, though, I mean,
and the problem with the Democrats is, I mean, they talk a good game. They don't.
I would, I would actually agree with you on that there is a lot. I think that there are some representatives who deeply care. However, I think as a whole, they don't. And I think that what you see happening, and both sides will claim the other side does this or their side does this. Both parties will claim every time we play by the rules and compromise with, the conservatives, we lose a little bit more ground, but we're trying to move forward. And there's this back and forth of give and take that is basically creating a standstill between the two parties. There's not enough,
which is ironic because they're all about the founding fathers who warned us to never be involved with political parties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
For this reason.
So they've created a situation, right? And this is both sides. This is Democrats and Republicans, but they've created the circumstance where I'll give a little, you take a little, you take a little, I'll give a little, back and forth, but they're essentially at a standstill as far as like actually moving the country forward in any meaningful way. And when I say meaningful way, I mean we should be, definitely there needs to be immigration reform. Well, just fucking do it. It's a hard job, but that's what you're sent there to do. That's why you're making $174,000 a year off the taxpayer's tit, is to do the hard stuff and get it done. Infrastructure finally got done, but that was fucking years in many administrations in the making. What I think is going to end up happening, and I hope I'm wrong, okay, is that no matter who wins, the other side won't accept it. And it's to what degree they won't accept it. That's my biggest concern. Whether that's going to be, small protests that break out and essentially are harmless, or whether that's going to be full-blown rioting, or whether that's going to be taking over capitals, whether that's going to be militia unleashed, whether that's going to be eventually a full civil war. And I think that's
18 years ago, I said, and I quote, there's going to be another civil war in 20 years.
Yeah. I had buddies of mine saying it back in, about 20 years ago. It was right around 04, 05, 06, they started saying there's going to be another civil war. But here's the thing that's interesting. Everyone who was saying that at the time were conservatives. They were Republicans. They've been saying it longer. I don't think that the Democrats have a taste for it.
Well, I mean, when I said it, it was more of just an observational, this is where we're headed.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that was the conversation that I was having back at that time, and those were the people who were bringing it to me. I agree with you, actually. I think that there will be some sort of, to what degree or how it plays out, I don't know. I just don't think it's going to be good.
Oh, it won't be good. I mean, luckily, I live in a largely Democrat city in the hood where everybody's armed, including me.
See, that's the thing that I find funny
and I was trained how to use them.
By a cop.
By a cop who was ex-military, two uncles who were ex-Navy. Yeah, I was taught multiple weapons hand-to-hand.
Again, that's my point, though, is that when you look at what the conservatives say, they always go, be careful, man, because we have all the guns. I don't think you realize how many Democrats have guns.
Yeah, Vermont has entered the conversation.
Yeah.
For all of Texas's, we've had constitutional carry since 2021. Vermont's had it since 1793, Junior. And guess what? Vermont's a pretty liberal state.
Very.
Yeah, this whole idea that, that none of the people on the left are armed, I just laugh every time.
You know what? I want them to keep thinking that.
Yeah, I like that they don't think that we have arms. You know what I mean? But I do think that that's, again, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to have these conversations. I don't want to have to think like this. I don't want to, and we did a pod on Civil War already, but the idea that these people who are whether they work in a warehouse, whether they work in an office, whether they're an executive, whatever, doctor, lawyer, whatever. And they have that bluster of, yeah, Civil War, bring it, bitches. I'll start fucking up everyone around me. You're not thinking it through. You're not paying attention to the fact that you probably have never been in the military. You've never seen somebody get their fucking head blown off. You've never had to deal with the idea of taking a life. You've never had to make the decision in a split second. Well, if I don't shoot him, he's going to shoot me. And now let's add to that. Oh, it's not a foreigner. It's not in another country. It's my neighbor.
Yeah.
You know,
So many people romanticize and glorify.
Well, that is the key word there, romanticized. They longingly talk about doing this, and there's a big difference between talking the talk and walking the walk. And
a lot of people think medieval warfare was this glorious and valiant and blah, blah, blah. No, it was not.
no.
It was horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And today is even worse. Why do you think all those vets come back as screwed up?
Yeah. You nailed it right there. And I think that that's actually a pretty good place for us to leave it is stop glorifying and romanticizing this idea.
Before we end that, I would like to ask both of you your opinion on how do we stop this?
I'll let Franz go first on this one because my answer is going to be pretty fucking short, I think.
Unfortunately, it's going to be between having the American population as a whole get its heads out of its collective asses,
mm-hmm.
or we just might have to throw down.
I think that this is a machine that is already out of control. I think that the idea was and I think this is both sides in agreement, saying what we need to do is we need to just divide them enough so we can control them. And I think that with that idea, you're bound to lose control because the mind virus of political loyalty is at this point infecting everyone in the country. And I don't see how I would have been the person who before would have said, well, we just got to organize and get the vote out and try to get the better candidate and everything will work out. I don't think that that's the case anymore. I think that unfortunately with the Trump presidency and his post-presidency and his legal issues and the fact that he has never gone away, he has been, a headline every single day for the last, 9 years, 8-9 years, every fucking day he's a headline. I think that we can't put the brakes on this bus. I think that it's going to be, unfortunately, very, very painful and avoidable had we been smart enough to know our own history. I think that's the thing is that we're dealing with a lot of people who just don't know that this story is played out before and we know how it ends.
That's part of it. But both sides prey upon the knee-jerk reactions of fear and ego, and nobody panics like Marca.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually that will come to a head.
I think that's what November is.
Panicked enough and are pumped up with so much ego, it will eventually pop.
And like I said, if Trump loses, I fully expect apeshit craziness and violence.
Oh yeah.
And I wish I could say that if Trump wins, that I would expect something different from the Democrats, but I don't. I think that's why I say I think it's literally it almost goes back.
I'm a little further left than the Democrats because if you look at the American political spectrum, which is just a snippet of the whole thing, yeah, the Democrats lean left. If you look at the actual political spectrum, Democrats are right of center.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you.
All progressives are centrists in Europe.
Yeah.
Today's Democrat is nothing more than 1980s Reagan Republican, or Reagan Democrat, however you want to call it. But today's Democrats are totally, essentially clones of what Reagan would have said was his people.
Right, which is why the Democrats don't actually fix anything.
I do. I agree with you. And I think that we found ourselves in a position of, it's one thing to say Democrat, and when you say Democrat, people immediately think leftist, liberal, libtard, whatever negative or positive they associate with that. And then the same for Republicans. Oh, you're a MAGA, you're a maggot, you're conservative, you're blah, blah, blah. Like, we're all about the name calling, but not about actually sitting down and going, well, what do we agree on? Let's start there. What do we agree on? Let's work.
One of my best friends is a minister. Okay. I'm a Norse, but we get along great.
Right.
Because we agree on more than what we disagree on.
Right. And
nobody does that.
And you can have conversations about the things that you disagree on, but you don't have to.
Exactly. And when we do, nobody's yelling, nobody's name calling. We're having an actual conversation. And that is what has been lost.
This goes back to, and I've now said this twice in the podcast, but I think it bears saying again. It goes back to when everyone was losing their shit that Easter fell on National Trans Day of Recognition. Okay? So all these people are all up in arms, saying all kinds of nasty shit on social media. I can't believe Biden thinks that Trans Day, and it's like, A, you don't understand how Easter works. You don't understand how it falls on the calendar based on a lunar cycle. You don't understand that it changes, okay? Even though you can just look at a fucking calendar from last year and realize that it changed. You obviously don't realize that day, that particular date, has been the same date for National Trans Day since 2009, okay? Right. And most importantly, no one's forcing you to celebrate.
Yeah.
It doesn't change your life one bit. You didn't have to run out.
All of them, 420.
Exactly. You don't have to run out and buy 420 balloons and put them on your lawn. You don't have to run out and have, a banner saying, yay, it's National Trans Awareness Day. It doesn't affect you at all if you don't want it to. But this does.
But it's the idea of, well, it doesn't mean anything to me, so it can't mean anything to you.
Exactly. Very much victim complex. Exactly.
But what we have here is a failure to communicate. Well, not anymore. It's become, unfortunately, the meat and potatoes of the conversation.
That victim complex stems from the knee-jerk reactions of fear and ego.
Well, hopefully, what we can agree on, I know we do, the three of us, but hopefully as something for the listeners, hopefully what we can all agree on is at the end of this, because my big fear is that, again, being a bit of a history nut, I know what remember the 5th of November was for England.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite.
And I am concerned that this year, because the election is on the 5th of November, let me double check that, but I believe it is, that we'll run into an American version of that in some form or fashion. And I do think that in general, overall, yeah, it is the 5th. In general, overall, most people have cool heads and will not participate. But all it takes is for that violence to spill over from wherever it starts into the next block, and then the next block. And it's always just that one spark that sends that powder keg into fucking orbit. And that's what worries me.
Could there be violence at the voting booths, the lines?
There could be, but
possible.
I don't...
Something that I keep thinking and worrying about.
I don't think that will be so much an issue because, first and foremost, most of the polling places, at least as far as I know, are either some form of a government building or a school. So most of the Go ahead.
Where I vote is like a neighborhood community center thing.
Right. But it's always government related.
Right. And every time I voted, there's never been anybody out there handing stuff out for like the GOP side ever.
Well, not just that, though. I mean, they have to, by law, they're supposed to stay so many feet away from the entrance of the building. And I think
where I vote, I never see anybody from the GOP outside.
That's interesting.
Well, the GOP is asking for volunteers, for poll workers to monitor what's going on this year.
You know what, though? I think the Dems are, too.
Well, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, which is pretty solidly Democrat.
Yeah. It's interesting because Ohio has historically been a little bit more red than blue, and has been, purplish on occasion. But it seems like as of late, it's leaning a little bit more blue in Ohio. That really set a lot of people off, didn't it?
Because, I mean, for years, Ohio polled at like 65% approval of abortion. And then they tried to end it here in Ohio and soundly had their ass handed to them.
Well, I think that's I think that's actually going to be potentially abortion could be the saving grace for democracy. And I say that because we've seen in the last two elections that abortion wasn't a huge issue. You got Trump on the campaign trail or the trial trail or whatever fucking trail, granola trail, taking credit for Roe v. Wade being overturned. And I think as people start to become aware of the fact that, it doesn't end there. So like with this Project 2025, one of the things that they will definitely do, because they say restore family and protect children, one of the things that they definitively have said that they would do is basically overturn, the gay rights. So you would see gay marriage go sideways. Was that Oberfell? Is that
yeah, I think
that's the case. And I think that they've got the Supreme Court to do it. I do. I don't think at this point the Supreme Court has lost all credibility in my mind.
Well, I could go on a tirade.
Oh, fucking please do, dude.
A judge is supposed to be neutral and impartial, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any political leaning, party leaning, religious leaning, personal opinion leaning, you are not neutral, you are not impartial. You are unfit for the bench.
Totally agree.
Every
Absolutely.
Supreme Court judge is a political.
And for life. And that's what fucks me, it just pisses me off.
And that's the basic level of my argument.
Yeah, I mean, but
when you get into like the Dobbs case, where like the Dobbs case had absolutely nothing to do with Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Like zero. It was about viability. It had nothing to do with Roe v. Wade. So they made an extrajudicial decision. That alone invalidates it. And then you have the fact that Alito went back to the 1600s.
Right. Oh, that fucking chapped my ass.
A legal argument. And the kind of guy he went back to just made it even worse. And then Alito saying that America had no history of abortion law was a lie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going through things outside of U.S. law, openly lying, making extrajudicial, just for that one case.
Well, but don't you think, though, that it turned out to not work well for them, because it turned out to be the dog caught the car and figured out they don't have fucking thumbs to drive it.
Right. But that's just, an example of that's who we're dealing with.
For all of the abortion laws being rescinded and their hopes of pumping up birth numbers, for 2023, births dipped in the U.S. by 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of that had to do with, depending on what state you were in and what those abortion laws were, I think a lot of guys go, fuck it, I'll jack off, I don't need it. And a lot of the women are like, come here, I'll blow you, and we don't have to risk this.
There's also been a large number of people actually getting sterilized.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that
just in protest of that.
Well, I would never get a vasectomy just to protest a law unless it was something that I wanted to do in the first place.
Right, but I mean
myself.
that's part of why those numbers went down, is because people are doing that.
Yeah, no, they are doing that, and I do recognize that. But like I said, it's the dog that caught the car, and then realized I don't know how to drive a fucking car, and even if I did, I can't reach the pedals, and I don't have thumbs. I can't grab the wheel, and that's what's going on with the Republican Party. I think that a large part of their problem right now is twofold. One, they are the dog that caught the car on the abortion issue. They're going to catch the car on these other issues if given the opportunity as well through the Supreme Court, whether that's LGBTQ, whether that's gay marriage, whether that's people getting gender reassignment surgery. They're going to find a way to catch that car, but what that might mean for them is that they no longer exist as a political party. Now, how do they get to that point? Well, in my opinion, the way that they got to that point goes all the way back to basically, the New Deal with, or the contract with America with Newt Gingrich. That you could argue saying that it started in Reagan's era or Bush's era, but I honestly think that where this really, really started to take off was with Newt Gingrich and the neocons, and then that became the Tea Party, then that became the Freedom Caucus, and then it became MAGA. And if you look at the problems,
Gingrich is where it took off, but I mean the gates opened with Reagan.
Oh, I agree. I think Reagan definitely kicked open the gates. But I don't think that he accomplished as much change in the same period of time as Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich, in a very short period of time, was able to execute a massive amount of change and really set the stage for what would come with the Tea Party Republicans and would come with, eventually MAGA, but in between the two, the Freedom Caucus. So when you look at the Freedom Caucus and then you look at the Republican Party and you look at the infighting that's happening, whether that's, Matt Gaetz calling for the McCarthy to vacate, or whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene now calling for Johnson to vacate, I think that they are cannibalizing the Republican Party. And I think that is actually, sadly, worse for America than all this other bullshit combined is when you don't have two healthy parties, you don't have a healthy, and I would be a proponent for, 3, 4, 5 parties, honestly, hoping for better conversation, better arguments, better ideas. But given the fact that we are a two-party system, when one of those two parties is sick, and I would say this even if it was Democrats, I would say this even, it doesn't matter who it is. If you have a two-party system and one of those parties are as sick as the Republican Party currently is, in their inability to govern, in their inability to lead, in their inability to even agree amongst themselves what their own fucking agenda is, that's a problem for the country. And I don't wish that on the Republican Party. I don't. I want to see them healthy. I want to see them coming up with good ideas that move the country forward. I want to see Democrats defend their ideas against the Republican ideas in healthy debate like it's supposed to be, whether on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate.
At one point, the Republicans were respectable.
Yeah.
They don't have that now. But interesting history note here. The people that really got Reagan rolling on what he did was Jerry Falwell and the founder of the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah. Actually, I that's a little tidbit I did know.
And those are the guys that started the Protestant anti-abortion movement. And you do know why they started the anti-abortion movement?
No.
Both of them lost. Both of their colleges lost their tax exempt status for enforcing segregation.
Holy shit. If there's a loophole, they will find it.
The founder of the Heritage Foundation was a segregationist. Falwell was a segregationist. The modern anti-abortion movement was started by segregationists.
Makes so much sense.
I didn't know that, but it does make sense that would happen. I loved the Hitchens quote about Falwell. What was it? If they gave him the world's largest enema, like it was the day he died, right? And he said something like they could give him the world's largest enema and then they could bury him in a fucking matchbox. And he's right. That guy was just so full of shit. There's so many grifters. And I wonder, like, you can say nasty shit about Clintons, and I have. You can say nasty shit about Biden, and I have. You can say nasty shit about the Obamas, and I have. We can go back. Really, the only one I can't say anything nasty about, and it's mainly not because of what he did in office, but because of what he did when he was out of office, was Carter. Carter was the class example. You know what I mean? Like
Carter as a person is phenomenal.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yes.
Horrible. But as a person, great.
Yeah, I mean,
No
like,
issues.
people don't even realize, like, the greatness of that man, even prior to being president when he was in, I think it was the Navy. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But he was involved with nuclear weaponry and actually, I believe, risked his life to fix some sort of nuclear something. I don't know the full story. I can't remember it. I remember hearing it and thinking, that's amazing. I did not know that. But then to go into politics and then to go into the presidency and then leave that and really leave it. Like, you didn't hear shit from him. And that used to be the case is like, at least for 4 years, you didn't hear shit from the previous president. You just didn't. They didn't comment. They didn't want to interfere. They wanted to let the new president make his policy, and whether they agreed with it or they didn't get involved. After the first 4 years, you might in year 5, 6, 7 hear them pipe up about something, but typically not.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me about Trump. This motherfucker's never going away. He's never going to go away. If he wins, he's not going away. If he loses, he's really not going away. The only way that he's going away is if he ends up in jail. And if he ends up in jail, again, you've got 30 million people, that even if only 1% of them or 10% of them get violent, that's a small army. That's a big army. Fuck that. It's not a small army. It's a big army. It's just unorganized. And that's what worries me is like, he needs to be held accountable if they find him guilty, but how are they going to hold him accountable when they know that potentially could create a situation of civil unrest, the likes of which this country hasn't seen since the Civil War? That's what worries me. Almost as much as him getting into office and implementing Project 2025. I think that scares me a little bit more.
That's what a lot of people don't realize. I mean, yeah, he left office. That doesn't change anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the exception. Before they left, that was it. You didn't hear from him. He's still around.
Every day.
Chirping.
All right. So I don't have any positive or good feeling vibes to end this one with. Either you two got some fucking uplifting, give me a fucking quote or something. Make me feel better.
I could leave this country. Y'all screwed.
Cattle die, kinsmen die, but your actions live on forever.
I like that. Your actions live on forever.
There's some Norse wisdom.
I like that a lot. Well, let me tell you, Franz, it's been an absolute
what
pleasure.
we do in life echoes for eternity.
There you go.
Yep.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate you coming on and being our first guest. We hope to have you back on. We can talk about anything you want. Specifically, if you want to get into Norse religion, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. I'd be fascinated to have that conversation with you. Hopefully, we can do this again. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's Elsie's Little Pickles. I'm Steve. That's Keith. And that was Franz. Thank you.
I still can't hear the music. Still can't hear the music.